back to Skyrock, and of course, Jose Perez is here with me. Hi, Jose.
Hey, how you doing, Chris?
Doing great. Today, we're going to be looking at obstacles. And when I say obstacles, we're going to be looking at them internally and externally. Internally, it's those obstacles that come up within an organization, and often leaders have to deal with those. And we'll give some guidelines of how you can overcome some of those. But also externally, when we're doing sales and so forth, you're talking to a client, and as you well know, if you've done any sales whatsoever, there's usually going to be an obstacle. And so we're going to look at what some of those major obstacles are, and then what are some techniques to get around that. So I'm going to lean really heavily on that external one first and then go right to Jose. Jose, you've been in sales a long time. I'm sure you've seen just about every obstacle that's come up. So maybe share some of those major obstacles and some techniques you use to be able to get around those.
Well, I guess, you're right. I've been around a little bit and I've done a lot of different things. And so the obstacles really typically boil down to, am I changing the way I'm doing business? Obviously expense is an issue, right? What does your product or service cost? Back in the day when I was selling franchises, I don't want to change my name and operate differently. When it came to technology, I can build that myself. So any number of things, and obviously everybody's got their own separate set of challenges based on what they sell. But I think a lot of it revolves around people not necessarily wanting to do things differently than they've been doing it, and or the cost of doing something and not maybe seeing the ROI. So when it comes to this whole topic of obstacles, I like to operate with a mentality of objection prevention. So what does that mean? Okay, an objection, as we all know, is when someone says, no, I don't want to do that, or no, that's not going to work, or no, no, basically, right? And so the way that you create this objection prevention strategy is you ask a lot of questions, right? You ask questions to understand what their business is all about. You understand what their challenges are, and you listen, right? Because the more you listen, the more questions you ask, and the more you listen, you're going to understand and identify issues that maybe even your prospect doesn't understand, or maybe they don't properly appreciate how much of an issue it is. So as you identify these things, then you start identifying the implication of not doing things differently, or doing things the same that you've been doing them. So the best way to understand implications is to quantify those implications. So how much is it going to cost you if you don't make this change? How much is it going to cost you, not only in hard dollars, but an opportunity cost? You look at companies that are trying to grow, and if they don't have the proper tools and systems in place, they're not going to grow. So there's an opportunity cost there. So I think all those things add up to an objection prevention strategy that puts you in a position where you are a trusted advisor,
Right.
and not in our case, in my case, we're talking about salespeople, not a pushy salesperson trying to push a product. A lot of salespeople make this mistake of pushing features and benefits. And I don't care how great your product is, unless I feel that I need it and it's going to solve my problem, I don't really care. And that's what creates objections. So as far as dealing with obstacles, if you create this kind of mentality of preventing objections, then the obstacles will kind of melt away, and you'll be able to go through and get someone to make a decision based on information that they were able to derive from the questions that you asked.
Yeah.
Does that make
I,
sense?
oh, yeah. I really like the idea of using the word advisor. That's really helpful because sometimes you've interviewed salespeople before, and one of the key questions many times a salesperson is asked in an interview is, are you comfortable asking for money? Well, that's a loaded question because I have to be convinced that my value is worth asking for money. I don't think any of us like asking for money of things we're not convinced about, let alone if we can't convince the customer. And convincing, again, isn't just being pushy, as you mentioned. I'm here to advise you, I'm here to help you. And when you realize that, you're going to be asking for the product that I'm trying to sell and not my pushing it off on you.
And you also, I think, need to be really passionate and articulate about this,
Mhm.
right? So you're not a robot asking questions. You really
Right.
understand and you really empathize with whatever challenge they're going through. And if you're passionate about what you do and how you do it, we talked on a couple of sessions ago about the why. If you understand why you're doing this and you can articulate that in a passionate manner, then again, those obstacles melt away, because it's not someone trying to convince me to do something I don't want to do. It's someone trying to help me to get to a place where I can do a better job with my company, with my business, with my life, whatever it is that you are working on.
Yeah. I might be putting on the spot here, but can you maybe tell a story of one of the biggest obstacles maybe you faced and kind of how you navigated that?
Um, Well, one that stands out in my mind early in my career, before I had the experience and the confidence that I have today, well, although I guess I had it somehow because I got through it. I was back then, and this is in the mid 90s, I was selling franchises, and I won't name the brand, but at the time, the particular brand I was selling did not have the best reputation in the luxury market.
Mm.
And I was in a luxury market trying to sell a company who had the name luxury in their name. So clearly, I walked in and I'll never forget the guy saying, "Why are you even here?" Right. And so
That's an
thankfully,
obstacle.
yeah. And he wasn't quite that nice either about it. And so I convinced him to just give me a shot and let me learn about his company. And what I learned was, yes, they were known in luxury and they were in a luxury market, but they weren't growing as quickly as they would like. And I got that out of him after a few meetings. They were kind of stuck. They were stuck at, I think at the time, I don't know, they had 100 agents or something like that. And they couldn't get past it for some reason.
Mm.
And as I dug a little deeper, I started finding out that, well, yeah, you have a name in the luxury market, but that's all you have. You don't have any training. You don't have any marketing. You don't have any global connections. You need to grow because you're not at a place where the value of your business is where it should be. And so as I was able to get him to open up about all these challenges that he was having, and then tying an implication to those problems, the issue of, okay, you guys don't have a great name in the luxury space started to kind of subside. It wasn't over yet. I still had some work to do. But he let down, I don't want to say his guard, that's the wrong way to put it, but he lowered the intensity of that objection, if you will,
Mm.
of that challenge, and now was able to listen. And so when I came in, eventually, once I understood all his issues and showed him the tools that are going to allow him to recruit more agents, showed him the global reach of that particular brand at the time, showed him the support he was going to get from that brand to not only kind of get over this whole idea that this brand didn't have the right name in luxury, which, by the way, it was starting to at the time, but we weren't quite there yet. And so, but anyway, bottom line is he got comfortable, and he, again, the challenge subsided, and he ended up affiliating. And at the time, was kind of a big deal in the world of that particular brand, and actually kind of rose me to prominence in my career. So I actually hold that memory very fond because it
Yeah.
did make a difference in the trajectory of my career.
Yeah. Sometimes the biggest obstacles are the path to get to some of our biggest victories.
Yep.
It's awesome. Well, let me switch gears then and look at some of the internal problems that we face and obstacles. And I think sometimes you're going to walk into a situation if you're hired and in a leadership position. Sometimes you look back, you say, maybe I created these myself because I founded this particular organization. But I've written down a couple ideas here just to kind of give kinds of obstacles. Number one, structural. They're kind of just baked into how we do things. And those can be characterized by rigid hierarchies or outdated processes. And there's something they need to be addressed. There's cultural, just the makeup of the people. Sometimes there's just this resistance to change or a lack of trust. And that lack of trust is a whole other topic we can talk about someday.
Let me ask you a question,
Yeah.
Chris. I mean, that last one I think is really key because I've been in organizations that had that rigid structure and culture. As an organizational development professional, how do you address that? How do you approach that challenge, that obstacle?
Yeah, I think you go back to when you look at your North Star statements or your mission statements or your vision statements, whatever you want to call them, to say, where are we headed? And you have to be honest enough to say, this is how we structured ourselves in the past to get there. And it's that constant revisiting and not being afraid of losing power or changing positions or whatever those fears may be, but being able to sit in a room and say, now let's think outside the box a little bit. Let's refresh and say, is this still the best strategy? Is it still the best structure? And I think part of that helps with the trust issue too, because you're involving everybody in that process. Sometimes there's a lack of trust because people are more inclined just to hold on to their position than to be strategic. And I think we need to be able to overcome that. But it is really honesty. And that's the whole thing, revisiting it often. I think this should at least be an annual thing that you do, is keep looking at your structure rather than just saying, this is who we are, this is how we operate. You'll never be able to grow.
Well, and even though it's not a sales issue per se, I think asking questions and understanding the implications right, of not changing the culture are also relevant in this case.
Yeah. So you've seen the structure and the culture. There's also operational. Sometimes there's just resource constraints and inefficient workflows. And again, it has everything to do with revisiting these things as you need to. And then lastly, personal. Sometimes lack of leadership support. You just don't feel supported. And we could talk about a lot of these things and have entire episodes connected to those. But the also personal is fear of failure. There is so much of a fear of failure that we sometimes go to work every day with a don't mess up attitude. And we already know how that works in sports. It doesn't work very well. And it's okay to go ahead and make that attempt. I think you've seen it. I know I've seen it as a manager. I love it when I watch somebody at least make the attempt. What I don't want to have to do is follow up behind them and say, why haven't you done anything? Say, go ahead and mess up. I remember hiring a young guy once. I had been mentoring him. And it was one of those moments I put him in a position where I knew it was probably too soon for him, but I also knew what I had in him. And I remember trying to explain to the rest of the leadership team why I wanted to put him in this position. And I remember saying, hey, I know what I have here. I have a young lion here. Now, he's going to rip up the furniture and pee on the carpets for the first year. We're just going to have to live with that. But I know what I have, at least. I have a young lion. Eventually, he's going to be able to work in a way that exactly what we need. And so fear of failure is something we need to overcome as well.
I think, and right before that, you were talking about kind of acknowledgement, and by the management team. I talked to a very good friend of mine a couple of days ago, and she just made a big sale. And she was really excited about the big sale. But you know what she was even more excited about? She was more excited about the recognition she got from her manager.
Oh,
and you know what that does? That makes you work that much harder, on the next deal and the next deal and the next deal after that. And internally, the same thing. If you recognize people and you give them positive reinforcements, sure, you have to coach them and you have to put them in the position that you put this gentleman that you're talking about. But if you give them the coaching and the pat on the back, that goes so far to loyalty and to creating a better culture.
Yeah. So whether it's structural, cultural, operational, personal, what are some things leaders can do to begin overcoming those obstacles in their organization? So I'm going to start with the first one quickly, just structural. Sometimes it's about creating a clear vision that you're not afraid to restructure because you know where you're headed. And sometimes as leaders, all they can see is our backs and they can't see around us. They have no idea where we're headed. And it's like a shepherd leading sheep, and those sheep get really nervous because they have no idea if we're headed toward a cliff or not. And sometimes it's okay as a leader, maybe just to kind of turn to the side and say, that's where I'm headed. And that really gives that clear vision. So that's one way to overcome some of that structural or personal type obstacles.
Well, and if you do that, then everybody's in it together. It's
Absolutely.
not just the leader saying we're going this way. We're all going and moving in the same direction at the same time.
Empower employees in those situations. Yep, right. Absolutely. Sometimes streamlining processes, always being careful to revisit that, because the more complex your process, the more obstacles everybody faces. So learning how to streamline those to have less in the river causing rapids as the river flows. Fostering an open culture, we talked a little bit about that. And of course, providing resources and training. That's where I always jump up and down and be like, we can help there. And just developing adaptability in general. But any last thoughts on overcoming some of these internal?
Yeah, I think all those things are incredible. Two more things I would add. One is delegation. I think that as a leader, you have to be able to delegate. If you try to just do everything yourself, you're going to fail. You're basically saying to your people, I don't trust you, or I'm better than you, or whatever. So I think delegation is incredibly important. And I think accountability is also incredibly important. We set this vision, right? We're training you, we're streamlining, we're creating this culture, we're training you. Okay, but we want something in return. Okay, you need to do your job, or you need to produce sales, or whatever the situation is. And hold everyone equally accountable. So again, everybody's moving in the right direction and everybody knows the deal, right? If everybody knows the deal, then there's no surprises when something maybe doesn't go the way it was supposed to, because everybody understood these are the rules. And that flows through into the culture too. I mean, all these things are interconnected. If you move in sync, if you know that North Star is, as you said, all these things work together to create a great culture and great results.
Good. Well, thank you again for joining me again today, Jose. And contact us, maybe have an initial consultation. We can talk with you and then move forward from there. But any way we can help you, the things we've been talking about, we'd love to hear from you. And feel free, send us even a topic. Say, well, I would love to hear you guys talk about something specific. We'd love to do it.
Yep. Thanks, Chris. Always a pleasure.
All right. We'll talk to you later, Jose.
All right.